Hello and welcome to Dialogue. Democracy is one of mankind's greatest achievements. In 2019, China introduced the concept of whole process people's democracy, which not only means that people engage in democratic elections, but they are also involved in consultations, decision-making management, and oversight. But how does that work in real life? How does China conduct consultative democracy at all levels? Why is consultation an important part of China's democratic systems? To help us understand these questions, I'm happy to be joined by Wang Huiyao, president of the Center for China and Globalization, who is also a former councilor to China's State Council. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Well, welcome to the discussion, Huiyao. China calls its own political system as a whole process people's democracy. So tell us, what does that mean? And particularly, whole process element, what is that? In particular, if you compare that with, say, Western style democracies.
I think that the whole process democracy that China has been practiced for so long is that really it divided into several areas. First, I think they have an election process. For example, we have about 2,900 delegates attend the National People's Congress. They are being elected from different groups and regions and sectors and all walks of life, in fact. So this is through the local district election, county election, and all those grassroots election as well. So and also remember in China, they're not only at the national level but also at the county level. They have at the municipality level, provincial level, and the central level. So there's at least four levels of this kind of election process. So that's number one. Number two is that. They have this consultative democracy where you have a CPPC. So CPPCC has actually another 2,000 members at the national level, and then they have another provincial, municipality, and county level. Altogether, there are hundreds of thousands of delegates, members of CPPCC across China, plus hundreds of thousands of delegates of NPC at different level across China. So they are actually, every year they have devoted a 10 days time, come together to debate and deliberate and also to propose and to pass the new laws, regulations, and all the exercise they are going through. So this is very important. Particularly, consultative democracy also involves 8 democratic parties. And also the Federation of Industry and Commerce and other non-party members. So they are making proposals, making recommendations, making suggestions at all time. But then, particularly during those political season, there are thousands of proposals, ideas has been collected. So those are really a great way of making the government decision-making process very informative and on a more democratic basis.
Mm-hmm. Well, you talked a lot about the Chinese democratic system there. You also mentioned about a consultative democracy. Speak of that, probably the most important body would be the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, or CPPCC. I know that you're a member in a way, CPPC member at the Beijing city level, and also you are a former councilor to China's State Council. Sometimes people would see that as Chinese cabinet, so the important government body in decision-making, policy-making. Tell us, how does it work, consultative democracy, and in particular for CPPCC, what kind of a role it plays or the impact it has in Chinese political life?
Yes, very, very important. I can give you some examples of that. For example, I was, in the Beijing CPPCC committee, and I was a member of CPPCC, member of Beijing. So during my time there, and for example, Beijing proposed going to build an international exchange center. So, but then, the government have a plan for that, have an objective for that, but how to achieve that? Then the Beijing municipal government really comes to CPPCC members to form the concrete recommendations. I remember I was leading one CPPC group at Beijing CPPCC committee, and then we started this potential of Beijing becoming an international exchange center. We talked to embassies, we talked to multinationals, chambers, different departments of Beijing municipal government, and also think tanks and NGOs and all the sectors involved, collect their ideas and through consultation on how to build Beijing into an international exchange center. For example, we said we should attract global talents, we should relax the visa, issue more green cards, we should have the foreign schools, have more foreign schools and have more foreign hospitals and to help accommodate all those foreign joint venture stuff. So that was really a great process we've gone through. And then the CPPCC Beijing committee has come up with a strong recommendation based on our half year of analysis, research, consultations, site visit, all those things. And then we put up the proposal to the Beijing municipal government.
Mm-hmm. Well, Huiyao, every year in March, an important political season for Chinese political life, we have two sessions. One is for CPPCC, another is for NPC or National People's Congress. How is it different from CPPCC? For overseas viewers, probably they're not that familiar. Like, what is the rule of NPC? How is it different from CPPCC?
Yeah, so CPPCC is an advisory body. Composed of over 2,000 CPPCC members. Their main mandate is to really making proposals, making recommendations, making studies, making research, making all those ideas that really work for improving the policy process. So they engage with government officials, they be in liaison with the sector or community they represent, and they interact with the government officials. So CPPC, mainly function as an advisory body, but the NPC is really, as more jurisdiction, is elected by people in the different district, different township and society, and all the government has to be assigned to a certain district to get elected, and then they are actually also have a standing committee for the NPC, and then there's every year they're going to pass dozens of laws and regulations that the NPC felt is necessary. So if the ministry or member of certain groups wants to pass in a law, they have to propose to NPC, and there's a debate among the standing committee members, and then there's hundreds of them, and then they have to put it for discussion, consultation with different groups. They also conduct hearings and doing all those exercises, and finally they pass in the law. So I think it's a law-making body for NPC, and CPPCC is an advisory body.
Well, Huiyao, I guess people are more familiar with the urban life and how it works, the political system in the big cities, in urban area. What about the grassroots level, consultative democracy, for example? How does consultative democracy work at the township, county level, or even at the village level?
Yeah, that's something I think China has been very proud of and has been practiced for many years. Actually, there's a village level election. For example, the village head, or sometimes even village party secretary, it was basically through the ballot. It has to be voted at a grassroots level, and it was not by appointment. It was really, somebody in a village has high reputation, has a good, have done a lot of good things for the community. Is a very respectful person, seniority, and many factors supported by the people in the village. So people like that got elected to the village head or village party secretary, which they can really led the villagers to really working on all those, no matter it's farming or it's sideline business and all the things. So that's how this system is working in China. Is that at grassroots level, it was every village head was elected, and of course, if this village head is doing something wrong or really, have committed a lot of corruption, then there's a party discipline and government discipline department look them over at county or village level, township level, for example. So I think in general, if it's just regarding the economic and daily and all those culture and all those livelihood of the daily life, they just make their own decisions. There's a highly autonomy for those village heads and even township heads. So I think that system works well. I mean, thousands of years. The family tree, the family seniority, relatives in the village that all support, and so you have to really the moral, the Confucius culture that you have to really do a good person. You have to be really a good example, and then you have to lead by example, and all those things that contribute to the high expectation of the villagers, and then they entrust the people with the responsibility of managing day-to-day business. And also, one of the modern features that if the village heads can improve the livelihood of the villagers, can lead them out of poverty, that's a very important criteria. So that's how it works, in the rural area, I think. But of course, up they go, and then they come into the election process of NPC delegates. Mm-hmm. So there's even now the fast delivery board have NPC delegates for them, and right. So I think we need to increase their percentage. I think representing all those people in the rural area, we need the rural area percentage increase for many of these sectors like that.
Mr. Wang, thank you for your insights. Coming up next is my previous interview with Dr. Victor Gao Zhikai, Chair Professor of Soochow University, about China's whole process democracy. Thank you, Dr. Gao, for accepting our interview. Well, we know that China calls itself a democratic political system, whole process people's democracy. So tell us, what does it mean? And whole process, this element in this concept, especially what does it refer to? How it is different from, say, Western-style democracies.
First of all, ever since 1978, China has achieved a complete and profound transformation of itself, socially, politically, and economically speaking. And by now, China is already the second largest economy in the world, and China's momentum going forward in the coming years and decades is still very strong. Now, there are Western countries which accuse that China is not a democracy, even calling China as a autocracy or any other names. But one thing they cannot explain is that whatever system that is working in China, if it is not democratically motivated, if the people do not have the right to participate in political life, how can you explain that over 4 decades or so, China has completely transformed itself, uplifting more than 800 million people from poverty and achieving the status of the second largest economy, and the economic gap between the United States and China is ever narrowing. So I would say China is fully entitled to call whatever system it is as a democratic system, because there is a Chinese way of people's participation in this political system, and they exercise what we call whole process democracy. And few people in Western countries want to acknowledge that the Communist Party of China is not the only political party in China at all. In addition to the CPC, there are 8 other democratic parties. I actually belong to one of them, and I'm very proud of my party affiliation. Further, there is a very large chamber of commerce which caters to business owners, private business owners, etc. And then further, there is a larger group of people called people without political affiliations. I think for any political matter which eventually is put into execution as a policy, for example, they need to be vetted and eventually verified and endorsed and supported not only by the CPC members, but all the other 8 democratic parties, as well as the Chamber of Commerce and the group which we call the people without party affiliations. And the democratic participation by the people of all walks of life in this exercise of political right actually covers all aspects of decision making as well as implementation, supervision, and eventually verification, you name it. And this is the only way why China has achieved such explosive productivity, efficiency, and economic and political transformation over a short period of only about 43 years.
Well, Dr. Gao, as you mentioned, there are 8 democratic parties and also, people without political affiliations, for example. This is on the political level. Obviously, there's involvement, participation in the decision-making process, implementation, as you said. So we call it like a consultative democracy, which is also a vital part of the Chinese democratic system or Chinese democracy. Tell us more about that and how do people probably beyond, let's CPC, the ruling party, participate in this or provide consultations to the governance of this nation?
Well, first of all, the 8 democratic parties were all established and founded before 1949, before the founding of the People's Republic of China. Each of the 8 democratic parties actually contributed a lot to the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949, and ever since then has been very much engaged in political activities, in political consultation, supervision, for example, and many of their senior and veteran members have also served in the Chinese government capacities, either at the central government level or at the provincial or municipal level, you name it. And one key point is that when we talk about the Chinese political system, whole process democracy, you can imagine the Chinese system as an automobile, and all the wheels are lined up in the same direction. And in that case, it's very different from, let's say, some political systems in other countries, because from our perspective, if their system is also an automobile, they have 4 wheels or 8 wheels lined up in opposing directions. And eventually you suffer gridlock, you suffer very low efficiency, you suffer partisan rivalry, for example, or internecine fight against each other, not for the fundamental interests of the people involved, but for purely political considerations. And sometimes the system actually works to promote the vested interests of the sponsors, or those who bankroll the political parties or their candidates. In that case, I would say the Chinese system really puts a premium on the people's interest. And social mobility, political mobility is huge in China. Everyone is encouraged to give opinion as to how you can improve our work. I personally have submitted many recommendations, some of which have been accepted and adopted by the real highest level of the government in China. And I'm not a Communist Party member.
Why don't you give us, a couple of examples, probably, like how does it work, when you present a certain suggestion, advice, an idea to the Chinese government or to certain government at different levels, how they probably can work better?
One example happened in July 2008, just before the Beijing Summer Olympics. We know that during the torch relay, there were a lot of hostile forces which want to surprise the torch relay in different parts of the world, in London and many other cities, for example. And eventually, the preparatory committee for the Beijing Olympic became a little bit gun-shy. They became alert, for example. They tried to do whatever they can to make sure that nothing surprising would happen in Beijing in the running up to the Beijing Olympics. At that time, there were many police officers, security guards, militias, for example, being stationed everywhere in Beijing on full alert just to prevent any unexpected surprising incidents, for example. My recommendation is a very simple one. It's called hook and spear. I would say we can expect that there may be different things unexpected happening in the course of the Beijing Summer Olympics, which would last for about 2 weeks. We can divide them into two completely different categories. One is the category of spear, meaning, for example, bombing, assassination, carjacking, poisoning, for example, which would result in immediate threat to the safety and security of the people. Now, then China needs to really take prompt action to take them out, because we should run no risk to put people's life or security or safety at risk. Now, there will be another category, which I call the category of hooks, meaning, for example, some people have ulterior motives or hostile motives. They would try to instigate a particular event. For example, they would wave banners, they would shout slogans, they would call something which would step on the red button issues of China, try to antagonize the relations. And then, if the police officers or the security guards spring into action without, for example, due moderations, there will be a scuffle, there will be a physical fight, for example. And then there will be foreign journalists or media people already being hidden somewhere. They will take a full view of what's happening, and then they will blow the whole situation out of proportion in international media, depicting China as a bully against, for example, these protesters, etc., even though the protesters would not have obtained any legal permission for the kind of protests they would be engaged in. Now, this proposal is very straightforward, dividing whatever that may be expecting to happen during the Beijing Summer Olympics into the hooks or the spears, and eventually it was adopted. And as a result of that, actually China avoided more than a dozen incidents which have been characterized as hook incidents, and China did not overreact to that. China was very patient. Police officers held their hands behind their back, for example, tried to wait out, because for the hook events or incidents, you don't need to rush into action to take them out at all, because given time, given patience, for example, they may take care of themselves. They will not spell the end to the glories of the Beijing Summer Olympics. And I'm so proud that a proposal like that will be adopted by the highest level of the leadership in China, including the party and the government and the military and the police officers, for example, and leading to very smooth execution of the Beijing Summer Olympics without major incidents impairing on the success of the Beijing Summer Olympics. I'm also very delighted that this proposal was put into use for many years after the 2008 Beijing Olympics. Some leader called me a scholar mobilizing millions of soldiers and police officers in China for the great successful conclusion of the Beijing Olympics. Now, this is just one of the many things that I've been doing over the years. I've submitted so many different proposals, big or small, long and short. Some of them have been adopted. Many of them didn't generate immediate impact, for example. But this is exactly what I, as a member of a Democratic Party, and thousands of other members of the Democratic parties and members of the Chamber of Commerce, people without political affiliations, take great pride in doing. We do not do this for our own benefit. We do not do this to satisfy our own intellectual curiosity. We do this for the benefit of the whole nation.
Well, that's right. Speak of this, whole process of people's democracy. Say, oh, there's election, there's implementation, governance, and then there's supervision. In China, we call it democratic supervision. Tell us something about that. How does it work?
Well, if you look at the composition of the NPC delegates versus the CPPCC members, there are several key differences. First of all, for the NPC delegates, most of them, or many of the majority of them are Communist Party members. And they are, for example, important government ministers, governors, party secretaries in different provinces, etc. They are chairmen of the large state-owned enterprises, for example. Each of them carries a lot of responsibility and portfolio when they serve as NPC delegates. Now, for CPPCC, it's very, very different. More than 60% of the members are not Communist Party members. More than 60% of the CPPCC members are either Democratic Party members, Chamber of Commerce representatives, or people without political affiliation. This makes a lot of difference because the CPPCC members have less restrictions and less limitations. They actually have greater flexibility. They can raise different voices. They can really alert the government to pay attention to extraordinary issues which may not be detected or did not surface in a timely manner. Therefore, I would say CPPCC and its members have greater flexibility in formulating their recommendations and opinions. Now, on the other hand, NPC delegates would eventually decide on the legislative work. CPPCC members mostly just serve in advisory or consultative capacities. They themselves are not decision makers. However, in the Chinese way of democracy, making a decision, adopting a law is only part of the equation. Because before you adopt the law, you need to solicit views from all walks of life. And once the decision is made, in terms of its execution, for example, and implementation, you need to supervise the implementation. You need to detect whether there is any corruption, whether there is any distortion, for example, whether there is any aberration in the execution. Now, this is where CPPCC members really kick in, because they can look at the same situation from different angles without institutional limitations or restrictions, and they can talk to their constituencies. Anyone in China can walk up to a CPPCC member and say, yes, gentlemen, or yes, madam, I want to ask you to reflect my concerns on particular issues. I want to raise my concern about corruption in certain quarters in China. I want to make sure that this particular policy can be revised or amended for better benefits. So the CPPCC members are not only working in their own personal capacities, they can be a funnel of information and feedback from all walks of life in China to the highest level of decision makers and the government and party officials. This is the dynamics of the Chinese way of doing things, and this is what we call whole process democracy in China.
Thank you, Dr. Gao. Thank you for speaking with us.